Hey everyone, welcome to the Courage 365 show. I'm your host, Ashley Easter, and we have a great episode here for you today. We're going to be interviewing David Hayward, a.k.a. the Naked Pastor. You've probably seen his cartoons going around the internet. We're going to be talking to him, talking about his art, and actually looking at some of the cartoons and dissecting like the story behind them a little bit tonight. So you're not going to want to miss this show. If you're listening to this now, just hit share, whether you're listening to it on Facebook, whether you're listening to it on Twitter, or even if you're watching on YouTube. That would be great if you would share with your friends so they can watch this live episode as well. But before we talk to David, I want to start by just recognizing what weekend we have coming up. And in the U.S., if you're listening from the United States of America, we have the 4th of July, Independence Day, coming up on the 4th. And there's a lot of mixed feelings about this holiday. You know, there's a lot of celebration about our Independence Day, and then there's a lot of tension as well, because there are people who have not experienced the same freedom as others in our country. And there are so many that we could talk about, from people of color, Black lives who are not experiencing the same freedom. The ERA is something that still has not passed, which would give women the same constitutional rights as men. So women still do not have the same rights as men under the Constitution in our country. We also have human trafficking victims who are literally still living in slavery today, and that happens around the world and including in our country. And so I just want to kind of temper this holiday with, if you're celebrating, maybe take a few moments this weekend to also think about the people who do not have the same freedom as you do. And I want to really drill down into talking about survivors today. So whether they are domestic violence victims, whether they have experienced sexual abuse, whether there's human trafficking going on, there are so many people who are living lives where they are not free to express themselves as they really should be. They're in relationships that are toxic and dangerous. They are, their whole personhood is being squelched by this abuse, and it affects every area of their lives. I know that because I'm an abuse survivor too. And when I was in a cult-like environment, there were so many things that were restricted for me. I wasn't able to live into who I really am as a person. I wasn't really able to step into my freedom. And so I just want us to think about this weekend all the people who don't have the freedoms to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Not everybody in our country has that privilege. And I think this is a time when we need to be focusing not just on, celebrating our country, but thinking about the people who don't have the same privileges, and focus on how can we work to change that? How can we make a difference? And here at Courage 365, it is our mission to help free people from toxic relationships, from abuse. We want to call out oppressors and abusers. And we do that on a weekly basis here on the Courage 365 show, as well as at our live events like the Courage Conference. We're planning on so many other ways to support survivors in the future, but I just want to call your attention as you're celebrating this weekend to those who are not experiencing freedom yet, and consider the ways that you can help them get to that place. So before we jump into our interview, we're going to stop for a quick break, and then we'll be back with David Hayward.
So there's choices that you have the opportunity to make. You can either stay with your abuser or you can leave. And make no mistake about it, it's going to be hard either way you go. But I can tell you one thing for sure. If you do decide to make that courageous decision to go, there's hope. So much hope.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Courage 365 show. I'm your host, Ashley Easter, and today we have David Hayward on the show. Hey David, thanks so much for being here.
Hi Ashley, thanks for having me. Hello everybody.
Awesome. Well, I'm just going to read your bio really quickly because you are a really amazing person. I have followed your work for years. When I was coming out of a very cult-like environment, you were one of the first people that I came across and just saw all your cartoons and your blog posts. And I remember the first year we had the Courage Conference in 2016, you tweeted that out. You made a cartoon to let people know about the conference, and that just made all the difference in the world to know we had support. So I've been tracking with your work for a while. Thank you for that.
Yeah, oh, you're welcome. Yeah, I forgot all about that. That's right. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me just read your bio real quick, and then I'll let you tell people more details about you. But this is really great. So David has a master's in Theological Studies from Gordon-Conwell Theological Seminary, a diploma in Religious Studies and Ministry and McGill University in Montreal, and a diploma in University Teachings from the University of New Brunswick. He served the church as a pastor for 30 years and left the ministry in 2010. Like all graffiti artists, NakedPastor, his a.k.a. David Hayward, uses words and images to challenge the status quo and offer hope to those who struggle and suffer under it. David, that is just so incredible. And I think it's funny that I just talked all about Independence Day, but you're actually from Canada, you know? So,
Right. Although I'm married to an American, so
okay.
I know all about July 4th.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
We just had Canada Day yesterday. So
oh, really? I didn't know they were so
yeah,
close. Interesting. Very
yeah,
cool. That's
yeah.
awesome. Do you all celebrate similarly as the US, fireworks and stuff?
Well, it's hard to celebrate this year, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is.
So it was pretty limited. And Lisa, being a nurse, she was working that day,
Yeah.
and so we just did our own little thing, and we watched the sunset in the evening,
Hmm.
and that was fine. But like because of what's going on right now with COVID-19,
Yes.
there's very little gathering going on.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Mm.
definitely. Same here. There's more gathering in the US than there should be, but
Yeah.
it's
Hmm.
it is still reduced from what it was.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I read your bio and I talked a little bit about how we met online, but
Mhm.
could you just fill people in on kind of your backstory? Like you used to be a pastor and then you stopped being a pastor and now you're doing something totally different online. So tell us about that.
Well, am I though? Some people
Ah,
claim I'm fulfilling the role of a pastor in many ways
yes.
by helping people um, develop their own spiritual lives. So that's
Yes.
something I'm really happy to do. I also help pastors and church leaders and abuse survivors and spiritual abuse survivors
Yeah.
and many other people who are still involved in the church or struggling to stay or wanting to leave
Mm,
or struggling to cope with leaving the church and how to create a new life for themselves post church experience. So, I'm still very much involved in all that. I feel like I'm
yeah.
still in the game, even though I don't carry the official role.
Right. You're
You know,
Twitter's pastor now.
yeah, I'm virtually a pastor, maybe.
Yes.
But yeah, so I grew up in a Christian home basically, and I went through so many denominations as we moved around. We just went to the most convenient place, and
Mhm.
so I call myself my own ecumenical movement because I've been so many places and been influenced by so many denominations, and
Mhm.
then I ended up going to Bible college. That's where I met my wife,
Mhm.
Lisa. I went to the States, went to Bible college, and then ended up, long story short, I ended up in the ministry. I didn't mean to, but I ended up in the ministry kind of accidentally, and then, struggled with that for 30 years, although I was a very committed pastor, very,
Mhm.
very much wanting to be a good one, as in
Mhm.
the Eugene Peterson was my hero, and I tried to
Mm.
emulate him and everything as a pastor. So, but I would work for some pastors, and I worked for independent ministries and others,
Mm.
and here and there. So, uh, growing up in the church and then being a youth in the church, and then, uh, you know, uh, being involved with other ministries and serving
Mhm.
other leaders, I experienced a lot of spiritual abuse.
Yeah, yeah.
So then when I ended up getting ordained, I found myself in the same system that had harmed me in
Mm,
so many ways, and tried to make a difference. Not just by not allowing abuse to happen,
right.
but theologically and spiritual experience and all
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing. And but what was most important to me was my own personal freedom is very important,
Yeah.
as I think it should be for any
Yeah.
individual. And by 2009, I felt my freedom was being more and more constricted
Mm,
as I wanted to grow.
right.
And I felt I didn't have any choice but to leave the ministry if I wanted to continue on my own
Right.
personal path
Yeah.
of spiritual growth. And I had to leave the ministry. And again, another long story short, I decided to teach university for a couple of years,
Hmm.
but then um, I took the leap into doing Naked Pastor full time, and that's what I do now.
Wow. And so tell
Yeah.
us about Naked Pastor. Like, I'm familiar with it, and I think a lot of our listeners are, but for somebody who's never heard about Naked Pastor, first of all, let's start with that name. How did you choose that name?
Well, I I started as David Hayward, and then I picked a name called Church Pundit of all
Uh-huh.
names, and that sounds so snooty. Anyway, so I decided I liked the name Naked Pastor, and then it was at the time when Naked Chef and the Naked Archaeologist and all that.
Oh, okay.
So I picked Naked Pastor and I forgot about it
Mm-hmm.
because it was owned by somebody, and then I come to find out I'd bought it. And I freaked out when I opened the email because I didn't know how much I'd spent, but it ended up being something like $70, so I was okay. And so I ran with it. So basically, Naked Pastor, and I was a pastor at the time. So basically, Naked Pastor is I wanted to do something very different as a blogger. And
Yeah.
that was back when blogging was really popular.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to tear back the veil,
Right.
open up the curtains, and let people see what the life of a real pastor was
Yeah.
like, with
Yeah.
all my struggles and my fears,
Mm-hmm.
my doubts and my questions, not just the victories and the
Right.
all that kind of thing. I wanted them to see what the life of a real pastor was like. So
Mm,
I started, so that's what the naked means. It just means
right.
raw, real, transparent, vulnerable, no adornments,
Mm-hmm.
just me being me. And it was around 2005 or so when I um, just thought I'd try cartooning. I'd been an artist my whole
Yeah.
life. So I thought I would draw a cartoon and they just took off. And I was kind of amazed at how powerful a cartoon can be,
Yes.
how quickly they can communicate a
Mm-hmm.
message. So I just challenged myself to do a cartoon a day
Mm-hmm.
for as long as I could, and here I am 15 years later, still
Wow.
drawing cartoons. Yeah, yeah.
That's amazing. Is that some of your artwork behind you on the wall?
Uh, 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 some of it,
Okay.
yes.
Very cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I love that so much, and I love how you're bringing transparency
Mhm.
to when you were a pastor, because there's so many people in ministry who really are not transparent. There's one thing that they're showing on social media and the thing that they're preaching from the pulpit, but then they could be having like a crisis of faith behind the scenes. They could believe something totally and completely different, and it's just not good marketing for most people
No,
to talk about that. But you decided
exactly.
you wanted to be honest, and so I really appreciate
Right.
that. Um,
Well, you have a
and
choice. I'm sorry.
no, no, go ahead.
Yeah, like I was told by different pastors and leaders and so on that you have a choice.
Yeah.
Either if you're going to do the whole authentic,
Mm-hmm.
touchy
Right.
feely, be honest and
Yeah.
real and all that, then you're going to struggle. If you
Mm,
want to be successful, you have to come across as confident,
confident. Yeah.
and you have to come across as knowledgeable and
Yep.
a leader and charismatic
Mm-hmm.
and passionate and
Right.
all that kind of thing. So and it seems that they were right, because I never had a big church or
Yeah.
anything like that,
Mm-hmm.
and always struggled with ministry. But I felt being authentic and real was far more important. I
Mm,
wanted to be, like I said, what I valued most was my freedom to be me. And
Right.
of course I wanted that for the people in the congregation and the
Yeah.
church.
Yeah.
And that creates quite a bit of chaos.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Create
that makes
chaos.
a lot of sense. Yeah.
Hmm.
I think it's interesting that the pastors actually told you that, like, if you want a big following, don't be vulnerable,
Right.
because church people oftentimes think that, oh, this is just how it kind of organically happens. But there's like a whole marketing strategy that goes into these mega churches. Like, it is a business. It is a
It is.
business.
It is
Yeah.
very much. And
Well,
see, the problem with the whole coming across polished and confident
mm-hmm,
and powerful and leader
mm-hmm,
is that everybody has to sign.
mm,
Everybody has to sign on.
mm-hmm,
And if you ever question that,
right.
you're in trouble.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's like any powered relationship,
Right.
right? Even right down to a marriage,
Mm-hmm.
to a church.
Yeah.
If there's the recognized power
Yeah.
and that's under question, then that's when the trouble starts.
Yeah. Yeah. You're definitely right. And that's what I talk about on my social media all the time. What we talk about at the Courage Conference is that abuse is always rooted in power and control. And so it's no wonder that so much abuse happens in these hierarchical religions, hierarchical churches, relationships, marriages. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, but one thing that I love about you is that, like you mentioned before, you use these cartoons to really invoke thoughts and feelings around concepts that somebody could write an entire blog post about, but you're able to convey a thought or feeling through like one cartoon with very few words, sometimes no words at all. And I would
Yeah.
love to kind of talk about your beliefs about art as resistance. So, art as resistance to power, to abuse, to toxicity. And how did you come to decide that that was a way you were going to be transparent, naked, vulnerable? And how did you decide to use art for that purpose?
Um, well, what's so cool about it is that the delivery is so quick
Yes.
that you can't do anything about it. It's too
Mm-hmm.
late. So when somebody sees a cartoon, whether they like it or not,
Mm-hmm.
it's too late.
Yeah.
The person
Yeah.
who likes it appreciates it. It
Right.
moves them, or enlightens them,
Mm-hmm.
or motivates them, or frees them, or whatever. If
Right.
somebody doesn't like it, they can't say, "I'm not going to read the rest of this post," or
Right.
"I'm going to turn the page," or what. It's too late. I've already planted it
Yes.
in their mind.
Ah.
So that's what's so fun about it. It's like a couple of weeks ago, I went to a Black Lives Matter march,
Yeah.
parade, and I did actually I have it right here, a Black Lives Matter sign,
Yeah.
and splattered it with white paint and all that. And
Uh-huh.
so to some people, that sign is cool. It's
Mm-hmm.
encouraging. It's it's uh, it's uplifting.
Right.
It's passionate,
Yeah.
and should evoke some kind of feelings of unity and
Mm-hmm.
we care. But to other people, it really makes them angry,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it challenges authority. And
Mm-hmm.
instead of evoking good emotions, it provokes bad emotions.
Right.
And so that's what my cartoons do. They have that
Hmm.
same kind of uh, power, I guess, where
Yeah.
they can either really um, make you happy or really make
Mm.
you angry,
Yeah.
or whatever. Yeah.
Right.
So I decided, I was writing these long posts. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words.
Yeah.
So I thought, let's do the picture.
Yeah.
And they seem, I have a lot of cartoons that aren't that great, but some are good. And
Yeah. Yeah.
they really do convey the message I want to convey
Mm-hmm.
to everybody that reads them. So yeah.
That's awesome. Well, what I'd like to do next is show some of your cartoons and maybe
Yeah.
discuss a little of the backstory. So let me see here. Let me bring them up on the screen. Okay, so
Oh, yeah.
this is one of my favorite ones. And if you wouldn't mind sliding over a little bit so we can get
Oh,
you
yeah.
full screen. Yep, gotcha.
There you
There,
go.
thank you. Um, I think this is one of the first ones that I noticed from you. I don't know what year you made it, but
Yeah,
tell me what you're thinking, because I have so many thoughts when I see
yeah.
this.
This is an old one. This one's been around for the abuse itself, but you know um, the word abuse.
Right.
And in the background, you see some ghostly kind of characters watching this happen.
Mm, yeah.
Um, One of the things I try to do when I'm addressing such issues
Yep.
uh, is to recognize that there's a symbiotic relationship going on between uh, powerful people,
Mm-hmm.
usually men, but
Yep.
powerful people,
Mm-hmm.
and the system they're working in or for.
Right. Right.
And so I'm always trying to be sensitive to that symbiotic relationship where,
Mm,
uh, given the right circumstances, the right person will become very abusive.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's kind of like years ago when I read Vince Lombardo's book, The Lucifer Effect,
Mm,
where he talks about that Stanford University project where they built a prison in the basement and got hired students to be the guards and the prisoners and
right.
all that, and it just went like in just a few days, it went to absolute hell.
Wow. Wow.
And it's just became a nightmare where the guards became very abusive and
Hmm.
prisoners were being injured and
Hmm.
just unbelievable abuse. And all these kids were, you know, considered healthy,
Right.
good citizens. But given the right system,
Mm-hmm.
they suffered, you know, the guards suffered abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And the guards became abusive. The prisoners suffered abuse, and the guards became abusive.
Right.
So that's what I'm trying to address in this cartoon, and a lot of my
Mm-hmm.
cartoons is this symbiotic relationship between. Here are people trying to hide the fact that abuse is
Yeah.
happening in their church.
Mm-hmm.
They're sweeping it under the carpet. A lot of churches do
Yeah.
this. A lot of pastors do this, where they don't want it to be seen.
Yeah.
It's not that it's not there. It's just that they
Mm-hmm.
don't want it to be seen. So they're very busy hiding it.
Right. That's excellent explanation of that. And I've talked to people who know that I do this advocacy for abuse survivors, particularly those in church environments. And they're
Mhm.
like, well, I've been to church my entire life and I've never heard or seen of abuse. And so I don't think that it's really true. And
Right.
it isn't until, some of these big newspaper articles come out that they're like, oh, well, maybe you weren't lying to me. It's like,
I don't.
yeah, well, but
I
they
know.
wouldn't necessarily see it unless they were the perpetrator or the one being abused. And there's usually that third group of people that isn't a target for abuse. Um, they're
Mhm.
just kind of on the sidelines, and so they don't know what's happening. Survivors are told to keep their mouths shut, don't talk about this, there's consequences if you speak up. And then the leadership, they're brushing it under the rug, like just what your cartoon says. And so there can be hundreds of people, thousands of people in a church that aren't aware that these dynamics are happening because they haven't gotten close enough to the leadership. And um, I
Exactly.
really,
Well,
really love, yeah,
yeah.
this image describes it so well. Yeah.
Well, and it's like take sexual assault victims or rape victims. Like they
Mm-hmm.
say, oh, there's only a small percentage that are actually reported,
Right.
and that's true in church abuse or
Yeah.
spiritual abuse. There's so little reported,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and how do you report that? You know,
Right.
and also there's a lot of shame attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of respect for authority.
Mm-hmm.
Thou shalt not touch God's anointed
Right.
ever,
Yeah.
and so you never criticize leadership, and
Mm-hmm.
you always protect it, even though they're not protecting you.
Right.
And so it's quite a mess, quite a system of um, abuse that can occur, and I've seen it. I've actually seen it,
Yeah.
and been in systems
Mm-hmm.
where the abuse was to me very blatant and I was
Mm-hmm.
suffering from it. And other people, even if they were suffering from it,
Right.
couldn't see it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really great. And there's another picture down on the line that I think I want to dive into that a little bit deeper, because you're right. There's like so many coded language put around the abuse, and so yeah. Let's move on to the next one. This like I said, this is really one of my favorites. I think it was the first one I saw from you. Ooh, yes. Okay, I like this one too. What are we supposed to do with it? And it's all these men looking at a woman, and oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I have felt this way in the church so many times with, leadership abilities, and I like to be seen and heard. I, want to be in some type of a, role where I'm, helping people publicly,
Hmm.
speaking truth to power. And that's not okay for women to do in many church systems, particularly patriarchal systems, even some egalitarian churches. Though they say women are equal, there's still the men as a gatekeeper. So
Right.
tell me about this one. This one speaks loudly to me as well.
Yeah. So that was drawn in 2013. That's 7 years ago.
Okay, yeah, I see the date there. Yeah.
Yeah, things haven't changed much,
No.
unfortunately, because I know quite a few women who are suffering under this kind of
Yeah.
treatment,
Yeah.
where I tried to draw her strong, confident,
Mm-hmm.
and a little bit angry,
Yep.
um, which there's nothing wrong with that.
Right. There's stuff to be angry
And
about.
that's right. She has things to be angry about, and that basically they're objectifying the woman.
Mm,
What are we supposed to do with it?
right.
Um, and as if they are the ones to determine
Mm-hmm.
what she can and can't do anyway. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's 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 one of the big problems. Like, and that's one of the reasons why I try to avoid the word allow.
Mm,
Uh, like, men should allow women to play leadership roles in the
right.
church or assume leadership roles in the church.
Right.
Like, you mean allow as if you're the one with the key? Like,
Right.
that word is so problematic to me.
Yeah.
But that's basically what a lot of the women I know struggle with in the church is this, where they want to, they're in the center.
Mm-hmm.
She's in the center. She's got power,
Mm-hmm.
and yet they're there's work to do,
Yeah.
and she can do it, and yet
Mm-hmm.
they are debating over the theological problem of what to do with women in the
Right.
church.
Yeah. And how would you link this to spiritual abuse? Like how would you frame this as a spiritual abuse issue?
Well, the subjugation of women,
Yeah.
where women are less than, and objectified and
Mm.
treated as, mm, slaves, I suppose,
Mm-hmm.
or servants, or
Mm-hmm.
I have another cartoon where there's a bunch of men sitting around a table, and there's the man at the head of the table saying, "Gentlemen, we're here today," something like this. "We're here today to discuss whether or not this patriarchy is a real thing or not." And meanwhile, all around the table, there's women serving them coffee and
Yeah.
cookies and donuts, and uh, that's sort of the problem it's addressing
Mm-hmm.
here, is that
Right.
is that what are we going to do with her? Well, let's put her in the kitchen, and
Mm-hmm.
she can make coffee for us for after church.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really good, and that's one of the values that we have at Courage 365 is that we're very much pro equality in all senses of the
Yeah.
term, um, for women, people of color, LGBTQ plus individuals. Like we just believe that when there's these hierarchies, abuse happens, and so by giving everybody
Well,
equality, then
yeah,
drastically reduces the chance of abuse happening. So,
that's right. Like, and so uh, I know there's a sliding scale of what abuse is for many
sure.
people.
Mhm.
But for me, even holding somebody back, or disempowering them, or
Yep.
silencing them, or whatever,
Mhm.
to me is abuse.
Yeah,
You
agreed.
might you might say, well, she's not getting hit, or or whatever. But to me, it's when you think you're better than somebody else and you have the right to make them suffer.
Mm,
That to me is abuse,
yeah.
and that make them suffer can be anything from, you know, physical violence to
Right.
holding back their rights.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really important conversation because I think when people talk about abuse, they generally their mind goes to the extremes
Mm.
of, the physical, the sexual, just very gruesome crimes. And those are definitely abuse and need attention and need to be addressed. But then there's also things
Yeah.
on a different end of the spectrum that are so much more subtle, but at the end of the day can still hold people back as much as some of those very actively violent crimes. And not all abuse is illegal. I think
No.
that's another thing that people need to understand is that there are certain types of abuse that are illegal, but then there are other types like emotional abuse and spiritual abuse that in many cases there are no laws against these types of things. And just because there isn't a law against it doesn't mean it's not wrong. Mm.
Just some of the spiritual abuse that I suffered working for an international ministry. I won't name any names, but it it took us years to recover
Yeah,
from that, and nothing illegal was done.
right,
Nothing illegal was done. It was just it was like a cult, like
right,
organization,
right.
and the suffering that we had to endure and the recovery time was
Mm-hmm.
just enormous. And
Yeah.
a lot of people, if I try to tell them my story,
Mm-hmm.
many people might respond with, "Oh, come on, get over it." Like,
Right.
geez, there's more important things going on in the world, but they don't realize how deeply,
Yeah.
uh, you know, okay, my role in it was I wanted this to
Mm.
work. I
Right.
was,
Sure.
I wanted this to work, but I was taken advantage of and I was abused
Mm.
and in all kinds of ways, my family,
Right.
and the pain is real and it can
Mm-hmm.
take a long time to recover from that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. And I
Mhm.
think people are often afraid to talk about those more subtle, undercover types of abuse because of exactly what you just said. People will say, well, that's not a big deal, just get over it.
Yeah.
But it is a big deal, and it can actually cause trauma to your brain, a physical change in your brain.
Yeah.
And it needs to be taken seriously. And we need to create an environment where people feel safe speaking up about that kind of stuff and
Yeah.
where they're given the support and help. So thank you for talking about that. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I
Okay.
want to encourage people too. If you feel like you're being silenced or you're being held back or you're being pressured in any way to
Mm,
do something you don't want to do, or believe something you don't want to believe,
yeah.
or adore somebody you don't think should be adored,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you just to take that seriously and to
Yeah.
honor that your
Right.
suspicions about doesn't feel right, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely. Trust your gut there.
yeah.
Okay. Let's look at the next one. Oh, oops, clicked away from it. There we go. Um, I'm not
Oh,
spiritually abusing you. That's God disciplining you as his son. There are so many times when I've heard this, in my own life or for somebody else, just like this discipline, whether
mhm.
it's a spanking or whether it's, a privilege being taken away, they're acting like this is a natural consequence or something from God, when in fact, there's a powerful person behind it initiating this discipline. And God didn't tell them to do that.
That's
Tell
right.
me about this one.
Yeah, I don't know how many times I've heard this, and I like the look on the guy's face.
Yeah.
He's like, "What? What?"
Yes. Yes.
Um, but
Mm,
yeah, this is one of the weird things about abuse is, um, m- I now most abusers, in my opinion, don't think they're abusing.
right.
They think they're doing the right thing,
Mm-hmm.
or the appropriate thing.
Right.
And most of the pastors I've known, or all the pastors I've known, or
Yeah.
church or spiritual leaders I've known who were
Mm-hmm.
abusive, really, really thought that they were um, doing the right thing. that they
Right.
were
Right.
playing their role as a spiritual leader,
Mm,
and that they were inflicting uh, pain and suffering on their people,
right.
and felt completely, absolutely justified in
Mm-hmm.
doing it,
Yep.
almost like a divine right of kings, that they had that kind of
Mm,
power,
yeah.
uh, because the mind has a very tricky way, and the church and abusive people have a tricky way of relabeling
Yeah.
things, repackaging things so that
Mm-hmm.
um, you know uh, uh, a slap could be a scuff, or
Right.
or me hurting you or shaming you publicly is
Mm-hmm.
disciplining you,
Right.
or you just rename it so that it gives
Yeah.
it a spiritual kind of tone, and then
Mm,
it's hard to argue with that. So,
right.
but pastors like this pastor here,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure he absolutely believes that he's doing God's work,
Right.
and because that's his view of God, that
Right. Right.
God hurts people to get
Mm-hmm.
them to do what he wants. He
Right.
really believes that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That scripture comes from, I think, Hebrews 11,
Right.
and so it's biblical too. So that's hard to argue against.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm.
I think that's really important. I think that's a key thing that we see in cults as well, is that um, they do one thing and then they give a completely different meaning to it. They say one thing and they give a completely different meaning to it. So, whether
Yeah,
it's the hitting or smacking and just, calling it something else, or,
yeah.
discipline. Yeah.
You you've heard of Jean Vanier?
I'm not sure.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay. Anyway, he's a Canadian, famous spiritual leader. I really admired him, and then
Mm-hmm.
after he died, it came out that there was sexual abuse stuff going on,
Mm-hmm.
and,
Yeah.
I'm not giving away any secrets. This was
Sure.
all in the news,
Sure.
and but the people that they abused, uh,
Mm,
they explained it in spiritual lange, that it was
right.
a union of souls, and
Yeah.
all this. And I'm probably quite sure that they were convinced that they were doing a
Sure.
spiritual exercise, when in
Sure.
fact it was sexual assault. So,
Right. Right.
and people were like, no way, they did that on purpose, that they were evil, intentionally did that. I really do think they thought they were
Mm,
doing the right thing. That's what's so insidious about abuse.
mm,
That's why you can't just say, just stop,
right.
because it's a mindset.
Right.
And
Deceived
they're
yourself.
system, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Absolutely. I would love to at some point hear you and Jimmy Hinton talk about this, because I think he comes with a view that a lot of abuse is very deliberate. And I don't know that he believes that for all types. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I'd be interested in a discussion about when it's deliberate and when it is something that they deceive themselves, when those two things intersect, and then also just either way, it really doesn't matter. It hurts the person. So whether it was intended or not, the intentions don't matter. The action that hurts somebody is at the end of the day the deciding factor of if it was abuse or not. Yeah.
Yeah, but some people think it's okay and even necessary to hurt
Right.
people.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I don't. I think you should
Right.
not hurt people. I don't even
Absolutely.
think you should embarrass people.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of the big things that came out a few years ago was this homeless guy on the street in a picture, and the
Mm-hmm.
guy tells the story of a new pastor of a big church, and he dressed up as a homeless person and went to the church and was mistreated, but he told the elders and everything ahead of time that he was going to do this. And just, after he was kicked out of the church and everything, he came back in as the new pastor and basically embarrassed everybody that,
Mm,
this is how you
yeah.
treat people, and everybody like, that's the kind of pastor I want. And I'm like, this guy, no way. This guy
Right.
manipulates people.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if he'd told his elders beforehand, listen, I'm going to come in as a homeless person. I want you to show grace and mercy and
Right.
generosity towards me. Everybody would have come along.
Yeah.
Everybody would have helped.
Absolutely. Right.
So
Right.
he was tweaking out the worst in
Yeah.
people. which you can always do.
Right.
And so even using shame to me
Mhm.
is not legitimate, a legitimate
Mm.
form of influence. So, but
Mm.
a lot of churches do.
Right, right. Yeah. No, that's good. That's really good. Well, let's take a look at the next one. Um, okay, so it says, well, actually, if you would just believe and do exactly as I tell you, like you should, you wouldn't think you feel so abused by what you think is me. Yes, it's classic putting the blame on the victim.
Yeah,
Yes, I see this so many times.
yeah. If you just behave, um, then you wouldn't think the so-called abuse
Right.
that you think I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's all your fault. You're imagining I'm abusing you.
Mm-hmm.
You're actually misbehaving. If you behave, then I wouldn't have to
Yeah.
do this.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And a lot of women hear that, right? If
Mm-hmm.
you'd just done this, then I wouldn't have had to do that.
Right.
And
Right.
parents
Mm-hmm.
and pastors, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's gaslighting, victim blaming,
Mm-hmm.
and we see that all the time. Yeah,
Absolutely.
kind of. These are probably quite triggering for some people, and if they are, I'm
Mm-hmm.
very sorry. A lot of you have probably experienced some of these things. I know I have, and but I think that's why these cartoons are so they move around a lot because
Yeah.
I try to say things as concisely as possible to
Mm-hmm.
convey the message. Hopefully, somebody will read this
Yeah.
and read that and say, "Oh my God, that's exactly how I'm spoken to by my abuser," and
Yeah.
then figure out a way to walk away.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. And yeah, I'm sure that there are people watching who can really relate to what's happening. And if you're listening to this and this sounds familiar to you, just go
Mm.
ahead and go to courage365.org and click on our Need Help tab. And when you click on our Need Help tab, it will give you a whole list of resources from hotlines to supportive blogs and websites, a list of places you can find counselors and lawyers. And of course, if you're in imminent danger, always call the police. But yes, I know people watching this today will have experienced some of these things. And if you're in an abusive situation, we've got support for you. Just go to courage365.org, click that Need Help tab, and there's a lot of resources, put down by category, so you can look through that. So yeah, David, thank you so much for bringing that up. Let's check out the next one here. This is the one I was wanting to get to because you mentioned so many times the kind of switching of words. Tell me about this one.
Yeah, this one was fun in a way, but I don't mean fun. I mean,
Right.
uh, it's I know it's going to enlighten some people when so you
Mm,
rebrand spiritual abuse,
yeah.
which happens all the time.
Yeah.
So shaming is convicting,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean that's what I was told all the time
Yeah.
when I
Yeah.
was publicly shamed,
Mm-hmm.
and they said that was the conviction of the Holy Spirit, right?
Right. Exactly.
Shunning is an attempt to it's motivating. It's
Yes.
it,
Yes, I've
it,
seen that.
it's a way to get you to
Mhm.
conform again to the group.
Right, right.
Controlling is mentoring.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I'm telling you what you need to do because you're my disciple and I'm your mentor,
Hmm.
and you need to do exactly as I say. All the controlling pastors, oh my goodness,
So many.
I could
Mm,
tell you stories. Ooh. And you know what? I've been there. I was a pastor. I know what it's like to use control. How easy
mm,
it is. I've
mm,
had people. I've had people sit down and tell me they want
mm,
me to tell them what to think and what to believe. That's what they pay me
wow.
for.
Yeah.
But they want me to tell them exactly what to think and how to live their lives. And
Right.
you know, if it's not explicitly said, it's indeed implicitly said in a lot of
Right.
churches. People want their pastor to lead them like a
Mhm.
bunch of dumb sheep.
Right.
Um, and that's why that metaphor is used so often.
Yeah.
And I do draw a lot of sheep, but for different reasons.
Right.
Brainwashing is instruction,
Mm.
teaching.
Right.
Guilt is repentance.
Mhm. Mhm. And I
Um,
think that one comes out with abusers a lot of times because they'll get caught, and then they'll be shamed or feel guilty, then they'll cry their crocodile tears, and then they'll be reinstated, and then we're just supposed to be like, oh, they can pastor again, oh, they can be in this leadership role even though they've harmed somebody. And so I think, I think that repentance and guilt, or crying over something doesn't necessarily mean somebody's changed.
No.
That's a good one. Mm-hmm.
Right. And actually, I wrote that for, I've done a cartoon of wolves eating a sheep.
Yeah.
Where the wolves say, I just love this repentance and reconciliation process.
Yeah.
Because that's what happens. They go right back at it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The guilt is actually for the victim feeling guilty. That's their opportunity to repent.
Right. Yeah, I can see it that way too. Yeah, that makes sense.
So when a woman is beaten, or you're ashamed in a congregation, or you do something wrong and you're told off by the leadership, or you're corrected in some or whatever, and you feel guilty, well, now that's your opportunity to repent and restore yourself.
Yeah.
Coercion, control, that is persuasion. That's a tricky one. I've been there where I've tried to persuade people or the church to do a certain thing. Where it's that line where it becomes coercion. Abuse is discipline. And that's like that first cartoon we showed, disciplining you as a son. And then discrimination is discretion or discernment. Where you're not actually discriminating against somebody, that the Holy Spirit has given you discernment. To not use that person or elevate that person or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah, this one really spoke to me a lot, this whole cartoon. And I think also like the brainwashing as instruction. I think if people really to study cults and the different elements that are present in a cult, that they would see so much of what we're experiencing in mainstream churches is really brainwashing. It's not encouraging people to think for themselves and get multiple different opinions and ideas so they can wade through it. It's not teaching people to listen to their intuition and, figure out what works best for them, to explore other ideas. It's just all very controlled information, and other things are so often just pushed off to the side, like thinking this thought, questioning your beliefs, we need to shut that down quickly, that's temptation. Questioning can be temptation. And this is just such a great one. And then also, like we mentioned before, like it is all about branding, and so many of these churches, they run like a business, and when you don't have consistent people in your pews, you don't have consistent tithes, and if you don't have consistent tithe money, then you don't get to buy your $20,000 sneakers or whatever. Or it might not even be in mega churches. This happens in small churches as well. But so much of getting people in the doors is marketing strategy. And I think if you're up front about, hey, this is, our plan or whatever, most people wouldn't come to the church. They use a lot of words like, this is a family. And it's like, well, actually, this is a business, and we need to start using some correct language. And there are pastors who are doing good jobs. There are other faith leaders in different religions and spiritual communities that are doing a good job. But I think understanding that a lot of what happens is branding, is marketing, and don't assume that it is, a green light from the divine just because somebody is able to speak well and, get a lot of people in the door.
Marketing is evangelism. That's how you would rename.
Right. Yes. That's good.
Evangelism.
Right. Absolutely. It's kind of like one of those multi-level marketing things. You get saved, then you get somebody else saved. Bring their tithes to the door.
Oh my goodness, how many times was I told that?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, we are going to take a break for just a moment and go to a commercial, and then we'll be right back and ask you a couple of questions to close out this interview.
Okay.
Hey, my name's Ashley Easter, and with Intuition Mastery, it is my mission to empower women to make wise decisions for themselves so they can take charge of their life and their destiny. I do this through teaching about the power of intuition, of tapping into your very own inner wisdom. When women tap into their intuition, they are more likely to be safer, happier, more successful, and more abundant. And when they do this, they then in turn not only create this wonderful experience for themselves, but also for those around them. With Intuition Mastery, I teach you the tips, the tricks, and the tools to dive deep into your intuition so you can confidently make decisions for yourself. Hey everybody, I'm Ashley Easter, the host of the Courage 365 show, and today I'm interviewing David Hayward, aka the Naked Pastor. We have just seen so many wonderful pieces of his artwork, some cartoons about abuse and spiritual abuse in the church and control and all these things. And David just has such a great way of just showcasing a thought and idea in just a short little snippet. And David, I really appreciate all the wisdom that you've shared, all the ways that you are able to just describe this so easily. And I liked what you said at the beginning of the interview, how with a cartoon, people don't really have the option of being like, I'm not going to read this anymore. Once they've seen it, they've seen it. And so, such an effective method of resistance. I love that. The question I have for you now is, you know, you have had a very interesting life, and I'm wondering what is one of the best pieces of advice that you have received that's maybe changed your life, maybe a motto that you live by. If you could share one thing like that, what would that be?
Well, I remember very early in my life, and I can't remember how early it was, but I remember a book being in our house, and it was called I'm Okay, You're Okay. I think
Mm.
that's what the name of it was. It's an old book because I'm old. It's old. And I remember that being such a problem to the. I remember sermons being against it. You're not
Mhm.
okay. You know,
Right.
you're not. You're a sinner. And but for some reason, when you asked me that's what popped into my mind, and
Mm.
I think my whole life has been driven by this desire to be me,
Yeah.
and a desire to be free.
Right.
And it's been my driving force to be free.
Yeah.
And I write about it. That's what my cartoons are about, and is challenging things that constrict
Mm-hmm.
and enslave and oppress
Right.
people, and showing people what it's like to be free and how it can be to be a free person.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me, I'm okay, you're okay, I think is really a good thing to
Yeah.
believe, and to live out freely that reality that you're
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. I love that so much, and I think it gives us another level of freedom when we're able to say to other people like, "Your business is your business." You know, I'm okay, you're okay. We can make different decisions and choices as long as
Yeah,
we're not hurting anybody else. I'm okay,
yeah,
you're okay.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
really
That's right.
wonderful.
As long as we're not hurting anybody,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, that's great.
That was my big thing with the church and community and so
Mm,
on. The driving question is, how can I be free without violating your
yeah,
freedom?
yeah.
If we can live together like that,
Hmm.
asking that question, I think we'll create a healthy and authentic community that's safe.
Right.
How can I be free without violating your
Mm.
freedom? I think that's the important question.
100%. That's so, so
Mm.
good. And I'd love for you to tell everybody listening where they can find you, about your social media, where they can get your artwork. But also, I'd love for you to tell them how they can download some of your courses. I personally gone through one of your courses on deconstructing religion. What is the name of that one again? It was so, so good. The
Uh,
content stuck with me. The name
how
did
to
not.
yeah, how to deconstruct your beliefs, or
Yes.
I think I
Highly
nicknamed it
recommend it.
"How to Lose Your Faith Without Losing Your Mind" or something like that.
Yes, yes, that course, it is money well spent.
Oh, thank you.
David, you really just helped me and the others in our group walk through,
Yeah, it was fun.
understanding different, systems and
Mhm.
ways of, thinking about faith and deconstructing and then deciding where we want to go from there and leaving that choice up to us. I love that. So tell us about your course, your social
Okay.
media, and your website.
Yeah, so I'm Naked Pastor. Just Google. Make sure you do it one word though, because if you do two words, you're going to see things that you can't unsee. So one word, Naked Pastor, David Hayward. I'm on all social media as Naked Pastor. So nakedpastor.com. And that's where, I sell my cartoons and prints and
Mm-hmm.
books and all that. But also, I have my courses at davidhaywardcourses.com.
Mm-hmm.
And there's several courses there, one on deconstruction, one on leaving the ministry, one on interpreting your dreams, and
Mm.
another on uh, money is spiritual. That's
Mm. Yeah.
and I've got another one coming on actually on till doubt do us part, which is about
Mm.
marriage and deconstruction. So
Ooh.
look for that coming out. And just look for me on Naked Pastor. I'm really good at responding to people
Mm-hmm.
when they email me or message me.
He is good at that, guys. He's good at responding.
So I love connecting with people all over the world.
Yeah.
It's amazing to see my most popular city right now is Sao Paulo, Brazil, a huge
Wow.
fan base in South America
Uh-huh.
and all around the world. So I'm just having a lot of fun doing what
Yeah.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So join me. Yeah.
Absolutely. Please definitely check out David's social media. He shares his cartoons like every day and
Every day.
just so many good ones. Like we only talked about I think 5 or 6 here tonight, and
Yeah.
you're gonna just want to follow him on social media. If only for the cartoons, like follow him for that, but also so many great courses and books and things. And I would also mention that while we kind of talked about abuse in the Christian church, so many of the concepts that David shares in his cartoons and in his courses are really useful for other faith environments and other religions as well, because he's really talking about universal principles, not just something restricted to a faith community. And, even if you don't identify with a faith at all, I have friends who are atheists or agnostic and they still enjoy his work and his courses. And so, pretty much wherever you fit in, I would really check out David's work. So thank you so much, David, for being here. It was so great to have you on the show tonight.
It was so much fun. I just want to give a pump for your YouTube channel. Everybody go sign up for their YouTube channel.
Yes, thank you. And I'm going to jump into that right now. So if you haven't followed our YouTube channel, just go to YouTube and then type in Courage 365. And if you would please give us a subscription, if you just subscribe to our YouTube account, we would be eternally grateful, because when we can get 100 subscribers there, then we can get a custom URL, which will be much easier for people to find us on YouTube. So please, if you wouldn't mind, subscribe to us on YouTube. And then you can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and you can see the handles below the screen there. And I'd also invite you to go to courage365.org. And just for visiting courage365.org, we have a free gift for you. That is our ebook over here, 5 Keys to Living with Courage. And that will help you as a survivor take the next steps into a courageous life of freedom. And again, that is our free gift for you just for going to courage365.org. If you need help, if you're in a crisis situation, please also visit our website and click the Need Help tab for resources, supportive blogs and websites, crisis hotlines, and of course, if it's imminent danger, call the police. Want to thank you all so much for watching tonight. Please give this a like and a share so we can get this message out to more people. Love you all. Live with courage this week.